Hello and welcome back to episode 4 of the Motherhood Map, Navigating Alternative Pathways to Motherhood. We are going to dive right in to medical assisted pregnancies and hormone therapies to help with pregnancy. Again, I did not actually go this route. However, I feel like I have good insight and we will discuss the costs associated with each. Let's dive right in as I start my screen share here as well. And here we go. So today we are going to talk about assisted reproductive technologies and understanding the adoptions. I do want to preface this with a little caveat. Although I did not go this route, it's simply because it didn't feel right for my body and the health issues I was going through. I have numerous friends that have chosen IVF or IVUI, different methods to conceive, and it's a beautiful journey. And now they have their wonderful children. My best friend has her 2 children that she conceived with IVF, and then what she calls her bonus 2 for 1 with her 3rd child. We can talk more about that later, but I have no issues personally with IVF or medical interventions when it comes to pregnancy. That is not why I didn't choose that path. It just did not feel right for my body. Okay, soapbox moment over. Our objective today is we are going to discuss medical interventions for pregnancy, what they are, and even discuss the brief overview of the medications included for fertility, implications of assisted reproduction, both ethically, morally, situationally, exploring IVF, IUI, hormone therapies, and even surrogacy. There's even some common misconceptions when it comes to surrogacy, and I'm here to help clear some of them up. But I want to empower you to make informed choices about your reproductive plans. Let's talk about medical options, the prescriptions, and the less invasive options. There are oral medications that also help with stimulating ovulation. The first one is called Clomid, and it can cost anywhere from $10 to $100 a month. So it's relatively inexpensive, depends on your insurance coverage, whether you're using generic or name brand. But what it does is it helps stimulate the ovulation or the dropping of eggs. Another option that's similar is called Femara, and it can cost anywhere from $75 to $300. Sorry for my typo there. Costa anywhere from $75 to $300 a month, depending again on your insurance coverage and whether you're choosing generic or name brand. There's another option. I don't know why my complete computer was glitching there for a moment. Excuse that. There are injectable medications. A lot of times people think the injectable portion just coincides with IVF. No, there are still ways to help with fertility just with injectable hormones, and it stimulates the ovaries to produce multiple eggs. So you're dropping more than one at a time. This can also help with harvesting of the eggs. If you are going the route of IVF, you would probably use one of these injectables to drop multiple eggs. So that way more eggs can be harvested or collected to then create embryos outside of the uterus. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, so bear with me as I use these terms. There are also, they're called gonadotropins. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm thinking gonad, obviously that's our bits and pieces. And that can range anywhere from $1,000 to upwards of $5,000 a month. Again, depending on how much you need, the medications, the name brand, etc. So just things to keep in mind as you're considering some of the less invasive options. Things to consider. I want to talk about a brief overview, again, like a 10,000-foot view of IVF, IUI, and other fertility treatments. What's the difference between them? Are you potentially ready for multiple rounds of treatments? Many times it can take more than one round of an embryo transfer for actual implantation and pregnancy. Are you prepared for a multiple birth scenario, meaning you have one pregnancy, but multiple children within that one birth? There's a family here located where I live, and they chose IVF for their second pregnancy and ended up with a quad. I think one of the eggs split and ended up with identical twins, and then the rest were fraternal. So yeah, all at once they had 4 children on top of the other children they already had. How do you feel about the best and most viable healthy embryo being used and the others being discarded? Not only in the test tube, meaning they have created the embryo, they do genetic testing, and they choose the best viable embryos to then implant. But also, once implantation has taken place, they will usually implant more than one egg, and then the best viable options from those are then chosen. Sometimes parents choose, if there's multiple implantations, to carry all of the eggs to term. But think about these things as you consider these options. Let's briefly talk about donor eggs, donor sperm, and embryo adoption. If you're going this route for IVF, you could get a donor egg. So maybe you're in a situation where you cannot get your own eggs out. They can use a donor egg and then use potentially your spouse's sperm to inseminate, or use donor sperm to create an embryo, or you can just outright adopt an embryo, which kind of piggybacks off of the topic we were just discussing, the other embryos. Maybe you've got some frozen that you don't want to go back in for another cycle of IVF. You can then donate those to another family that's trying to conceive. So there's other ramifications and considerations, both ethically, to consider here. There is the route of surrogacy also, which there's legal and ethical considerations there too. Let's talk about the difference between a gestational carrier versus traditional surrogacy. A gestational carrier is a woman that is only carrying an embryo that is not hers biologically in any way, shape, or form. It's not her egg, obviously. It has been the eggs usually of the intended parents. Sometimes there's donated sperm or egg, but it is not biologically hers, and then it is implanted into her and she carries to term. Versus traditional surrogacy is where it is the woman's embryo or egg, excuse me, that has been fertilized and she's carrying to term with the father's sperm in that situation where she's still a carrier for someone else's child and not the intended parent. There are numerous agencies that exist to match intended parents with the right surrogate. It's almost like an adoption agency, meaning they are matching parents with the right woman that aligns with their values or their goals, or even maybe where they're at logistically in the country. You can get matched with somebody that's not in your own state, but you have to think about, are you comfortable with that if you are using a surrogate? Keep in mind, each state has its own laws regarding surrogate care, costs, legal binding, everything. I'm not a licensed attorney. I cannot provide legal advice. So please seek a lawyer that specializes in family law, reproductive law, and an agency for surrogacy for more information. The surrogate becomes a legal binding contract, almost like a business contract between the intended parents and the surrogate. So at least discard the misconception that this woman can just run away with your child. Legally, no, that's not how it works. Now let's talk about financial, emotional, and ethical considerations. One round of IUI can range anywhere from $500 to $4,000, depending on your health factors, the rounds, the medications monitoring, etc. So do you have the budget for that? One round of IVF can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000 or even more, potentially even twice that. And that's only for one round where you might not end up with a successful implantation and pregnancy. It could be more considering medications, the clinic, the services included, but it can even increase if you have to go out of state or out of town or to find your clinic. I know for me, the agency I was working with was called Oregon Reproductive Medicine in Portland, Oregon, and they have a couple different locations in the Pacific Northwest. I chose the one in Oregon at Portland area because it was an easier travel destination for me, but I had to include my time, my gas, my lodging to go to my appointments as part of my consideration when pursuing this route. Potential costs of surrogacy. They are obviously all over the place, but it can range anywhere from $70,000 upwards of $200,000, depending on the contract. Because not only are you paying for the medical process, but more can be negotiated to be covered. So it could be housing, food, medical care, doctor's appointments, counseling services, even more can be negotiated on behalf of the surrogate. Do you have that kind of money laying around to potentially pursue surrogacy? Just things to consider. Again, like I said, every state has different laws, surrogate care, costs, legal bindings, etc. I did just want to touch on some real testimonies and stories. I personally considered surrogacy. we even got as far as finding a woman in our community that had been a gestational carrier for 4 other parents, all with successful matches and placements post carrying. I just decided not to pursue it simply because of the medical procedures I would still have to put my body under just to harvest and retrieve eggs. I figured if we were going to go the route of surrogacy, we might as well create a biological child, whether I carry or someone else carries. Essentially, surrogacy is IVF, but in somebody else's body, for lack of a better way to describe it. However, I do want to share a story of a friend of mine. She has carried her own biological child. She's adopted an infant and been her own gestational carrier for an embryo using donated sperm and a donated egg. They got to choose from a list of sperm donors and egg donors, chose the 2 that they wanted, created an embryo, and then she was the gestational carrier for this child simply because of health factors related to them becoming pregnant. For more on her story, it's pretty inspirational. Be sure to check out my podcast, Miss Style, Strength, and Grace, available on most platforms, Apple, Stitcher, all the things. I did want to talk about some common misconceptions regarding medical assisted pregnancy. This is not a comprehensive list, but here are some common ones. That it always results in multiple implantations in one pregnancy. Not necessarily. My best friend is an example of that. Her first 2 pregnancies were just one embryo that implanted with a successful child born after that. It's only for women that are older. Again, not necessarily. Numerous women are looking into these options in their 20s and 30s. IVF, IUI are a last resort after exhausting all other options. Case in point right here. I didn't try IVF. I didn't try IUI. We didn't go those routes, but we felt called to adoption right off the bat. Medical assisted pregnancies result in less healthy babies. Research has not shown that. Again, there's more that we can dive into with that, but that's not the case. IVF causes early menopause. Again, not necessarily, or that treatments increase your risk of cancer. No studies have seriously shown that. I'm not a medical professional, so please find a practitioner whom you trust to ask specific questions to about your health situation and pursuing medically assisted pregnancy. I can personally recommend Oregon Reproductive Medicine. They have Northwest-based clinics, both in Washington and Oregon as well. So that's just one of the resources I can attest to. Where would you start researching medical assistance? Here are some places to start. Like I said, Oregon Reproductive Medicine. If you live in a rural area, you will most likely have to research clinics and in larger metropolitan areas. If I was taking my body to a specialist, I want to make sure it's an expert in their field. Have your blood work done, but also have your partner's full reproductive assessment done as well. In your guided journal now, you will also find a link to the country's top 10 fertility clinics. Most are located in the eastern portion of the US, New York, that area, but still, it's the top 10 if you want it. Segueing into our next episode, we are going to preview it and choosing your own path forward. I'll leave that there today for episode number 4, and have a good rest of your afternoon.